Robinette Kennedy, and I'm here with Felicitas Goodman, who is a psychological anthropologist. And Felicitas has just finished conducting a weekend workshop of ritual trance postures. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that Felicitas has done surrounding the postures and some of the theoretical perspectives that she has developed in her work. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the work that Felicitas has done focusing on ritual. She has made an important contribution to our understanding of ritual in an historical perspective, in an anthropological perspective, and in our relationship with the environment and with the alternate reality. She has discovered by looking at a wide range of ethnographies and myths about ritual that ritual is basically focusing on birth. And I would like to ask her now to talk a little bit about that and how she made that discovery and how that discovery relates to the previous understanding that we've had in anthropology about ritual.
You know, there is a famous volume of material, or rather many volumes, edited during the Second World War when anthropologists couldn't go out to do fieldwork. And so they were asked to just write about what they already knew. And one of those volumes is about South American Indians. And I have always been interested in religious behavior. And I came across a number of different accounts about various customs. And it seemed to me such a jumbled story. They would say, well, you know, these spirits appear and then they disappear and then they come up as something else, and so a very, very strange situation. It seemed like a picture that somehow was viewed through a broken prism, if I want to use that simile. I had just had a course, I was still a graduate student, and I just had a course with Erika Bourguignon about Lévi-Strauss. Lévi-Strauss, to those of you who may not be so familiar with him, very simply in a structuralist form, says that there are two factors that are in opposition to each other, and then in the middle there is a mediating term. And that's how things always represent themselves. For example, we might take from Christian mythology, there is heaven and there is earth, and then the human is in the middle, and in one way he or she belongs to ordinary circumstances, ordinary life. In the other way, he or she has a home in the other reality. So the human represents the mediating term between heaven and earth. Now, it's a simplistic scheme, really, and I'm not particularly committed to structuralism, but at that time I thought it would be an interesting experiment. What I decided to do was to put all these various strange little facts that were mentioned about Indian societies in South America, religious tidbits, as it were, almost like inclusions, like globs in other kinds of material, and put them all on individual cards and see what happens. Now I had a whole big room full of cards. And I think I slipped into something like an altered state, because after a while I was beginning to see a pattern. And in the beginning, this pattern was not necessarily a religious or a ritual pattern. What I was seeing was that occasionally these people would touch, and then at other instances they wouldn't touch. So I wrote a very complicated paper that distressed the person for whom I wrote it, but he gave me an A+ on it anyway, because I said there is a tactile plane where people keep touching each other. And then there is a ritual plane where this seems to be translated somehow into ritual. And in the beginning, because I'm so oriented to what happens in the human body, this tactile plane seemed to me much more important than the ritual plane. How does that translate I only had a very sketchy understanding of what was going on there. But on the tactile plane, I saw the mother giving birth. That seemed to be a central issue in these societies. Then there was, again, on the tactile plane, which today I would probably call the ordinary reality plane, I saw that the infant was being received and strengthened. And then I saw a spot where the infant was placed at his mother's breast and nurtured. And then I tried to figure out, well, what happens on the other side? What happens on the ritual plane? And I did that purely visually. I'm very visually oriented. So I looked, well, what would correspond to the mother's pain as she gives birth? And I thought, well, this is the same thing as what society, excuse me, subjects the initiate to, pain. So the birth on the tactile level had an equivalence on the ritual level, which was the initiate's pain. So there was a curious equation going, where the mother's pain was equal to the initiate's pain. So basically, the mother equaled the initiate in a very curious and complicated way. And then I went on. The others were not too difficult because you have in many rituals, you have the giving of strength. For example, people will have in a religious ritual smoke blown on them, so that would correspond exactly to what the infant is being given on the tactile plane. And then you have the infant being held and in some way touched. And it seemed to me that on the there was now in a very complicated scheme an equation set up on the tactile plane still between the infant and the patient. The infant was being handled and the patient was being massaged.
You mean the patient of the shaman?
Of the shaman.
Yes.
Of the shaman. So this was getting to be a very complicated system. And then in the end, again, in a curious mixture, the initiate cum mother was given a meal, but there was also a sacred meal. So now where does that belong? Is that on the tactile plane still, or is that on the ritual plane? Well, eventually the ritual plane took over, and I could see that in a very sophisticated way, these ancient rituals, and my initial experience was with the various societies in South America, and then later I analyzed hunter-gatherer rituals, very complicated ones that we know from Australia. And eventually I understood that in these very sophisticated ancient societies had taken this human drama and had transferred it totally into the ritual plane. And then they did something that I had difficulty in understanding in the beginning. They used a kind of a shorthand, and they kept switching. Now the yam is the initiate. Now the yam is the baby. Now the yam is the child. Now the yam is the girl, and so forth. So of course they are familiar with it. They can understand it. They don't need any dictionary. But we, as very unsophisticated outsiders who want to try to understand this kind of ritual, had to continually do mental gymnastics in order to understand it. Now, here I had this picture. It was like a canvas, which went from birth to the festive meal. But then the Australians especially, it was reported of them. I know now that everybody does it, but it wasn't reported. The Australians invite the spirits of the ancestors to take part in this feast. So now I had an unbalanced system, because here on the left side was the ancestor who was being invited, the spirits of the dead, And on the other side, what was on the other side? Logically, there should be the regeneration of the society. So tentatively, I called the right side, visually again, I called the right side the sex complex. And I was trying to figure out, is that represented any place? And as soon as you begin looking, you find it. It's like, like in any kind of scientific discovery. When you know what question to ask, you're actually home in and free, right? In free. Ali Ali in free, as my children used to say. When I was looking for that, I found such intriguing things as the initiates in the forest among the Aquashavante making arrows, and the arrows look like humans. They have faces but no mouth. They have hair where the point of the arrow is, and they have a split end, so they are really humans. And so the initiates from the rainforest shoot these arrows into the village. So you have the village, the womb of society, and the arrows of male regeneration coming into the receiving womb. It's curious what people will do when they try to interpret ritual.